Now that's like a little dark, but I had to close my blinds because the sun is beaming right in here, and then like it was creating like the lines, you know? You just can't win, honestly, with when you're trying to use natural lighting sometimes. So it's just gonna be a little dark. Today I have my favorite books of each month of the year video. So this is going to be a different list than what will end up being my top 10 of the year, which I am planning on having up. I think that'll be like my last video of the year. I think it'll be up in like not January, like December 31st. I think it'll be like that Tuesday. So I'm going to be sharing my 12 favorite books from each month of the year. However, I will say not all of these books are on my top 10, and there are some books missing from my top 10. So they will be very different videos, but some months, you know, I read multiple favorite books, and there were other months that I was like, yeah, you know, like I enjoyed this book a lot and it's my favorite from the month, but it doesn't stand up to like my favorites of the entire year. Let's go ahead and jump right on in. In January, my favorite book, and this was actually the first book that I read so far this year, and that was The Good Girl by Nikki Sloan. I absolutely love this book. It is the 5th book in the Nashville Neighbors series. You don't have to read the other ones in order to read this one. However, I will say Preston mostly is a character that you see from book 1, The Doctor, because that book is an ex-boyfriend's dad's romance, and Preston is the ex in that book. And I will just say Preston sucks in that book. Like, he is not likable, he's not very redeemable, and you're like, yeah, get with his dad, Cassidy. Like, you're rooting for her to like ditch him for his dad. But then he gets his moment to shine in this book, and I absolutely loved him. So this is a brother's best friend, good girl, bad boy romance. So our hero, he obviously has just like not a great reputation. He definitely has not made the best choices, but he's really trying to turn around his life. And one of the people who has never turned their backs on him is his best friend. So he has a lot of loyalty to his best friend. However, then when he spots his best friend's little sister Sydney at a graduation party one day, he's instantly kind of like, oh, he's kind of taken by her. But the best friend says she's off limits, so he's like, I'm gonna respect that. However, Sydney, our heroine, she is sick of being the good girl. She lives under her parents' thumb. Like, they've completely disowned her brother, so they've kind of put all of their expectations onto her and all of their really harsh rules, and she doesn't really want any part of that anymore. So the best way that she wants to rebel is by getting Preston to kind of teach her how to be bad. And obviously they have to kind of be secretive behind people's backs because of the brother in the mix. Anyways, I loved this. I loved their romance. I loved Preston's character development. I loved everything about this book. I started the year off with a true bang, and yeah, definitely my favorite from January. Then another absolute favorite, Head in the Game by Rebecca Raith. So this is a part of the Grovetown College series. However, now, so that was like a bunch of different books that authors kind of wrote in this universe. However, now Rebecca Raith has I don't know what it's called. She's written her own series now with like different sports romances, and this is the first one, and this is a coach athlete romance, age gap as well. So one of our heroes, he is a retired NFL player, and he gets hired by Grovetown University to come and coach their college football team. They won a championship, and they're like, you're gonna be the one to help get us there. And one of the things he does is recruit our other hero, who he's a very, very talented football player, but he got kicked out of his last university for sleeping with the coach's niece or something, and then kind of like exposing that. So yeah, he got kicked out. He's got a bit of a bad reputation. However, he is an amazing player. And when he shows up at this new university, like, the coach instantly is like, I'm gonna push you, and he kind of pushes back a little bit. He's a little bit of a brat in that way. Like, he just likes to kind of push the coach's buttons, and it ends up being their romance. They end up, you know, being attracted to each other. But let me tell you, these two fight it, because obviously they know the one hero is on a scholarship, so he can't risk anything for that, and he does have a future like in football, so they don't want to risk that. And then also our other hero, like, he doesn't want to risk his job, obviously, and they do fight it, and it's so good, and it's slow burn, and I love the depth of this romance. I loved everything about this. It was easy to be my favorite of February. Then for March, we're gonna kick off where, you know, the beginning of my reading year was so freaking good. Like, these first 6 months are just like insane banger after banger. My favorite book that I read in March, God of Malice by Rena Kent. The first book in the Legacy of God series. Not going to be the last book in the Legacy of God series that you're going to see in this video, but this is where it all started. So this is a mafia kind of like series, dark romances, all college romances taking place, where at these two universities where all of these wealthy, elite, and then also like mafia families send their kids off to university. And this one follows Killian and Glyndon, and Killian is an actual psychopath, like legitimately, so just know that going in, you know, he's not the good guy. He's really not, but I mean, I love him. And it basically starts out where Glyndon is kind of at the foot of this cliff and she ends up slipping, and he's there and pulls her back over the edge, or like saves her. But then he's like, yeah, you're gonna need to repay me for that favor. And she's like, excuse me? And he's like, oh, I'll throw you back over the cliff if you don't do what I want. And then he stalks her. Listen, it's so good. It's also second generation series from other books in Rena Kent's universe, so you do not have to read the other ones in order to understand these. However, I will say it'll like enrich your experience, I guess. I've read certain of the parents' books. I haven't read others. You do get parents' POVs. You get normally, I think, like 2 chapters from the parents' POVs in here that obviously then I think are more fun if you've read the parents' books, but if you haven't, like I said, you can just jump in. It ends up being very much like a game of cat and mouse between these two. Love it. One of my favorite dark romances, and definitely kicked off the series well. However, oh, no, we're not to that yet. Okay, then I took a little bit of a break from Legacy of Gods, so we'll get back to that in a second. Then for April, my favorite book, again, one that I absolutely love, King of Pride by Anna Huang. I took this on vacation with me to read, and this was like the perfect vacation read. I like binged the absolute shit out of this book. I love Anna Huang's books. If you're new to my channel here, then like you might not know that, but if you aren't, then you've always heard me talk about her books from literally 2021. I love her books. And King of Pride is no different. So this is the second book in the Kings of Sin series, and they are all billionaire romances, and Kai is a billionaire. He is set up, he's hoping that he is one day going to take over his family's company. However, when his mom is getting ready to retire, she's like, I'm not just handing it over to you. You're gonna have to interview like everyone else. And he's kind of like, what? Okay, like I guess I better like get my shit together. So he's starting to kind of really work to make sure that he can like land that job and that the company stays within the family. And then at the same time, Isabella is our heroine. She is a bartender at the Valhalla Club, which is this club that all of these billionaires go to, and it is very off limits. You do not like flirt or like date members of the club, whatever. But she and Kai just kind of instantly have this sort of like chemistry, I guess, when he's there. Like he's quiet, he's reading, he plays the piano, and she really likes that. And anyways, Isabella is just kind of like floundering a little bit. She doesn't really know what she wants to do with her life. She loves writing and she would love to be a writer, but kind of like everyone in her life always tells her that like she's never gonna amount to anything, and she kind of is made to feel by her family like she's kind of like the screw up a little bit. So she really grapples with that a lot, and Kai kind of helps her see that she does have talent, that she has worth, that she can do it. And it's just like a very, like their connection is just very organic, it's very sweet, it's very natural. I think a lot of the reason why people overlook this book, like it doesn't have the like catchy things of like the My Wife from King of Greed or like King of Wrath, where she's like spending a bunch of his money and is kind of like getting back at him, whatever. These two, they're just like healthy, they communicate healthily, they're great together, they have like good chemistry, but they're just, it genuinely just feels like watching two normal people fall in love, and I absolutely love and adored that. So one of my favorites from Anna Huang so far, my favorite in the Kings of Sin series that I read. I still haven't read Sloth yet, but loved it. And yeah, easy favorite of April. Okay, I'm gonna open the blinds now because it seems like the sun is gone, so we'll see if that's okay. Watch, I'm sure it'll pop back out and then I'll have to get back up and like close them again, but hey, at least if we can get some natural light for a little bit, then that would be nice. May, my best book of the year. That, I mean, I've talked about it so many times. We got back into Legacy of Gods. We got back into it, and I read God of Wrath, which is the third book in the series. It's Jeremy and Cecily's book, and these don't have to be read in order. They are marketed as standalones. However, like you obviously see overlap of other characters and other things if you read the entire series. And this one, so once again, it's Stalky, it's dark romance. So basically Cecily is best friends with Jeremy's little sister, so she's kind of like seen him around, and she immediately stands up to him whenever he tries to be controlling, because he is a mafia prince. So you know, he's just kind of used to getting whatever he wants, and he's not used to people talking back to him. So then when Cecily does, he's kind of like, who are you, and who do you think you are to be talking to me like that? And Cecily's just not afraid to do that. And Jeremy even tells her, he's like, you do not want my attention. But she has caught his attention, and he ends up stalking her, and he kind of realizes that there are some things in her past that she kind of wants to like exercise out. And she has this big crush on Landon, who is like Jeremy's rival. Like he hates this man. So then that makes him even more mad to see Cecily kind of like still pining for Landon when he wants her. And oh, it's so good. I feel like I do such a bad job explaining this book every single time because I try to like hold myself back from like giving things away, but at the same time, like, I don't know, I just want to like spill everything about this book. It's perfection. I very rarely am reading a book where I like purposely put off reading it because I don't want it to be done, because normally I'm like, oh, I just want to like keep going in it, whatever. And I did, but I truly never wanted this book to be over, that I like literally would put off reading it just because I wanted it to last forever. I love this book, and it was the easiest favorite of May ever. And then June rolled around, and we are to our final Legacy of Gods book that we will be talking about in here, because God of War came out in June of this year, and this was my favorite book that I read in June. I absolutely loved this one. It's the sixth and, well, it's not the final book anymore, actually. I don't have to say that anymore, because isn't it Kiss the Villain? Is that what the next one's going to be? I'm so excited for that one, Student Teacher, I can't even contain it. Anyways, but God of War was, at the time, the last book in the Legacy of God series, and this one follows Eli and, oh my gosh, Ava. I was like, why am I completely blanking on her name? But this one is an amnesia, marriage in trouble, marriage of convenience, again, like mafia, billionaire romance. So basically these two, they hate each other, and you see them like hating each other all the time, and their families know each other, so they've known each other for years, like growing up together. And Ava has always had a crush on Eli, but he basically crushed her heart into a million little pieces, so she has hated him ever since and loves just kind of like making his life hell. However, then she, one night out at a club, she has this night, she ends up driving away, and she has like a little bit of an accident, and she wakes up, and 2 years have gone past, and she wakes up and she has a wedding ring on her finger, and Eli's like, oh, Mrs. King, let's go home. And she's like, I literally just yelled at you at the club last night, but like you're telling me that was 2 years ago now, and I'm married to you? What? Yeah. I will just let you read this to find out how that all goes down. I will just say, this one made me cry. I think I cried in a few of these ones, but this one definitely made me cry the hardest. I love these, protect these two. Oh, still, I don't even know, like my full Legacy of Gods ranking, like God of Wrath is number 1, but then this one, Pain and Fury are all tied for number 2, like it goes back and forth. I genuinely loved this one so much. I'm not a fan of the amnesia trope, but it like worked in here. I really actually vibed with it. I loved everything about these two. I loved it. And yeah, easy favorite of June. Of course, now the sun's coming back out, so you could see why I like had my blinds closed earlier, because then whatever, I'll try to like keep my face here, I guess. Okay, then, you know, we still have some good books that I loved, but I will say, after I finished Legacy of Gods is where my reading just like went downhill for me this year. I struggled so hard with the worst slump of my entire life this last half of the year. So I still love a lot of these books, but I will say, like this stack right here, you're gonna be seeing these again. Okay, July. Vow of Deception by Rena Kent was my favorite book that I read this month. So this is the first book. Oh, actually I own it. I literally own it. Vow of Deception. So this is the first book in the Deception trilogy, and these two are Jeremy's parents, and you actually see Jeremy as a kid in this one. But so it's a mafia romance, and basically Adrian is this huge mafia boss. I think he's Russian mafia boss. And Leah, our heroine, she is homeless. She's living on the streets of New York, and then all of a sudden one day, this man swoops in, Adrian, our hero, and he's like, hey, so basically you're a doppelganger for my dead wife, but I need you to come, because no one knows that she's dead, so I need you to come and pretend to be my wife. And she's like, I'm not gonna do that. Like, yeah, I'm homeless. I don't really have a lot going for me right now. And like, I'm not on my best track, but also I'm not gonna do that. You can make me do that. And basically he kind of frames her for murder if she doesn't. So he's like, you can go to prison or you can come and pretend to be my wife. So she ends up taking him up on that, and she goes and pretends to be his wife. That's all I'll say about this one so far. I still have yet to finish this trilogy. I still really want to, because I loved this first book. I'm really excited just to like finish out Jeremy's parents, because obviously Jeremy and Annika, she's the heroine from God of Pain, like I love both of them so much, and especially because there's a bit of an interaction in God of Pain between Adrian and then Aiden King, which is Creighton's dad, who's from the Royal Elite series, and I just want to fully be able to appreciate that showdown. So I will still finish this, but I really enjoyed this. Good mafia series. Then in August, Secret Lucidity by E.K. Blair. I loved this book. It is a coach athlete, student, teacher romance, and it's very emotional. Like, this is not one I'd say, like, you know, like a lot of these other ones, they're like really hot. This one, no, it's much more about like the emotion, and I was not expecting that when I started reading this one. So our heroine, she is a very, very talented swimmer, and she is heading into her senior year of high school, and her dad has been her swim coach her whole life. She has this bright future ahead of her until tragedy strikes and kind of her entire world is flipped upside down, and she doesn't really know how to like outrun her grief, basically. And then it ends up being her romance with her swim coach, not her dad, obviously, new swim coach, and he's also a teacher at her school, and he kind of helps pull her out of that grief a little bit, and just like when she truly has no one left to cling to, he's kind of the only person around that is willing to step in and help her and sees that she just needs someone to be there for her. So it doesn't really start out like romantic, it does just start out like him trying to be there for her, and then it turns into more. But obviously it's very forbidden because of the age gap and because of him being her coach and her teacher. I will just say, I truly did not expect, wow, okay, son, I truly did not expect like the emotion out of this one and just how much it would truly make me like feel, but I loved it and I would definitely recommend it. Do I need to close the blinds again? Whatever, we're rolling with it. Then in September, I read this thick boy that I've had on my TBR for so long. I buddy read it with Sam from Sam Reads Little, and that is Nocticadia by Carrie Lake. I loved this book. Okay, also I read it on Kindle because, oh my gosh, this is like huge. This is like the Bible. This is a dark Gothic or a dark academia romance, also student teacher, and our heroine in this one, her mother dies of this mysterious disease. She sees these like creatures crawling out of her body after she dies, and she's like, that's not normal, but no one believes her, basically. So she has kind of then set out, she wants to be a doctor and she wants to help find a cure for whatever her mom passed away from, but she does not have like any money. She's taking care of her younger sister, and she's just trying to keep them all afloat as this like 20-something-year-old. That is until she ends up getting a letter from Drcadia University offering her a full ride scholarship. And if she goes there, she knows that she can help find answers for what killed her mother, for this illness. And there's one professor on campus specifically who's kind of doing research of what sounds very similar to what she thinks that her mom potentially like had. And so when she arrives, she gets enrolled in his course and she wants to help out with his research. But our hero, he is extremely grumpy. He's very reclusive, and he has his reasons for not really trusting anyone, but he also has his reasons for really wanting to make sure that he can figure out what is wrong with these people and this like parasite type thing that's going on. So he does reluctantly end up accepting her like to be his TA kind of a little bit to help out with his research, and it ends up being the romance. There's so much more to this. Like, truly, the setting, the university, that is all a character in and of itself. It's so atmospheric. That's one of my favorite things about this book. I loved Carrie Lake's writing in this. It's very beautiful. It's very poetic. And I also love the slow burn. These two, it is a slow burn romance. I will almost say that the romance kind of is like side by side with the plot in this one. Like I could almost see like if you're a big like romance reader like myself being like, I want more romance. I will say, I mean, you get a lot of romance in between these two, but it is very slow burn. And like I said, the plot definitely like drives this book, and I loved that because I was very intrigued by the plot. I loved the premise. I loved this university setting. I loved the twists and turns that this book took. I loved everything about this book. It's so good. Yes, it's huge, but it's definitely worth reading. And in October, I read another one that I just absolutely loved, and that is The Dixon Rule by Elle Kennedy. This is the second book. I think it's the Campus Diaries series. Oh, this one is a forced proximity, friends with benefits, or like fake dating, hate to love romance. So Diana, she is a cheerleader at Briar University, and she lives at this one apartment complex off campus that again is like a character in and of itself with all of these different residents. It's very like fun. I really enjoyed actually like all the residents in this setting. But her like aunt basically left this to her. So she lives at this apartment complex, and she is not happy when she sees Shane, who is a hockey player, moving in across the hall from her. She's like, how did you get in here? I don't want you here. She like swears off hockey players, specifically him, because he slept with like everyone on her cheer team. So she just looks at him as being like a fuck boy. But Shane, he's struggling. His ex-girlfriend broke his heart, and he's just, been kind of, dabbling a lot, trying to get over that, but he's realized that that's not what he wants. He wants a girlfriend, but Diana, does not believe him about that whatsoever. And they just basically have this, banter with each other back and forth, now being forced proximity. There's a lot to this. Actually, definitely check your triggers on this. It looks like very light and fun, and it is, but it deals with some really serious topics. I loved this one because it just, again, Elle Kennedy's writing just flows for me. The banter between her characters always works. It always hits. The emotion, the build up, the slow burn, the hate to love. I love everything. I loved everything about this book. I still think, I don't know. I honestly don't know if I loved this one or The Graham Effect more, but I can't wait for book 3. I will literally read anything that Elle Kennedy wants to write within these kind of universes. Then in November, I only read 2 books, but this was my favorite of the 2, and that is A Ship of Bones and Teeth by Karina Halley. So this one is a dark fantasy Little Mermaid retelling pirate romance. So our heroine, it obviously is a spin on the Little Mermaid, so our heroine is the Ariel. She is a siren, she's a mermaid, and when she's 16, she goes above water and she ends up seeing Prince Eric and immediately falls in love with him, goes back under the sea and finds a sea witch in order to change her, and she does. She agrees, so she gets to go up to the surface, gets to live this life, and now basically the majority of the book takes place 10 years later, where everything is not what she thought it was going to be. This life is not what she thought it was going to be, and she kind of longs to find this sea witch again to see if she can get her fins back, basically. And her and Eric, they're on a ship, they're doing something, when they are kidnapped, they're overrun and kidnapped by this pirate and his ship, and our hero ends up being the pirate hunter, so it's kind of captive, and immediately from the jump, he's like, something is not quite right about you, but I kind of like that. And she also senses that something is off with him and his crew, but she can't quite pinpoint it either, and it does end up being their romance. I love Little Mermaid retellings. I've said it once, I'll say it again, and this was a great one. I love the pirate aspect of it. It's obviously this different kind of world, but I will say the world building isn't super complicated, so if that's not something that you like if you're just normally a contemporary romance reader and not really a fantasy one, I will say this one is very easy to follow because it isn't really a lot of magic systems or anything like that, or this fantasy world. It feels grounded, but it still has those fantastical elements to it. I loved it. I loved the connection between these two, and I most specifically just really, really loved our heroine in this one. And last but not least, so we are in December. So I, obviously, when I'm filming this, it's only halfway through the month of December, but, so I can't really say, I guess, definitively, I didn't even grab it. But I will say I'm 99% sure this is going to end up being my favorite book that I read in December, and that is If There's a Way by Jessie Walker. This is the second book in the Lost Boys duet. I've been wanting to get around to this one literally all year, and I finally picked it up. I think I'm halfway through it. I'm reading it on my Kindle right now, and I just love it. I can't really say anything about this book specifically of the duet because it does follow the same characters and picks up with the same timeline of book 1, but the entire premise is it follows Will and Way. It's an emotional friends to enemies to lovers romance. So basically these two, they grew up together, they went to school together, and they were best friends, and then something happens where they were kind of ripped apart, and then now in present day, Will, right? I think Will is the one who he recently lost his boyfriend, so he's just been kind of driving around the country on his motorcycle trying to find some sort of purpose again, and he ends up back in his old hometown where Waylon is still there and living, and he works at this bar, and he has a band there, and he's still not, he's not the same Waylon, and Will is not the same Will either, but he is not the same boy that Will remembers when he was younger, and Waylon immediately is like, I don't really want you here, the son, I don't really want anything to do with you, but Will ends up staying around, and it's them kind of like getting reconnected. It's so emotional. Check your trigger warnings on it. It's very dark. I loved book 1 so much, it made my top 10 of last year, and yeah, I'm really enjoying book 2 as well, so I'm gonna say that that's probably gonna be my favorite book that I read in December, just because we are getting down to the end of the year, and I honestly don't really see myself finishing that many more books for the year, quite frankly. Like, I'll probably finish that one and maybe like 1 or 2 more, but just with the holidays and stuff, and I gotta get writing on the next book that I'm writing, so I don't know how many more books we'll read, so I'll say that it's gonna be If There's a Will, or no, If There's a Way, because the first one is Where There's a Will. That is it for today's video. Like I said, this is not my top 10 list. There are books missing from this that I am very excited to talk about and include on there. So actually, let me look over at my schedule. So Fave Books of the Month is going up on this Christmas Eve, actually. Then on Friday, I will have, this is all subject to change, but this is at least my schedule right now, TBR retrospective, and then I will have top 10 of 2024, and that takes us through the end of December videos. So I guess that's what we'll talk about right now. So anyways, that should bring us up to the end of the year. So anyways, that is it for today's video. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you when I see ya.